back, reconvening for our second superintendent candidates interview. So on behalf of the board and D11 community, I go. Dr. Clementi, welcome to Colorado Springs School District 11.
Thank you so much.
I just got a brief bio of you that I'm going to read for the community. Dr. Tammy Clementi is an educator, leader, researcher, and consultant who has served as a school and district turnaround specialist for the Colorado Department of Education, National Director of Academic Planning and Analytics for a private learning company, and Chief Academic Officer for both Aurora and Pueblo City Schools. She has also served as Director of Elementary Education, a building-level administrator, an instructional coach, and a teacher for 14 years. Tammy believes that as educators, we have a moral imperative to prepare today's students for tomorrow's world, and she wants to be part of the solution in advocating for bold strategies that dismantle today's systemic inequitable practices. Dr. Clementi says that public education is her passion, and serving educators to ensure all students succeed is her obsession. So with that, the board is pleased, Dr. Clementi, that you are one of the top 3 candidates for the superintendent position and to host you for the past couple of days. I hope you had an excellent and productive visit to our schools yesterday. The board appreciates you taking the time and interacting with our various stakeholder groups, staff, parents, community members, and students. Hopefully you got to learn a little bit more about the district through these interactions. So you heard in my, when I was talking to you, I mentioned that we have about 25 questions. To be precise, we have a total of 24 questions. We have about 90 minutes to get through those 24 questions, and we will stop around 7:30 p.m. I will provide reminders along the way as to the time that is remaining, and we'll see how many questions we get to. Okay. And if we have time in the end, we can open it up where you can address the board and ask a few questions too. You have roughly 3 to 4 minutes of answer time for each question, but that's not set in stone. Some questions may need a longer response, others a little shorter, so we'll let you pace yourself accordingly. So we do want you to certainly take the time to share all the information you think the board should consider as we make this critical decision. And the board will take rotations asking those questions. And you have the list of questions in the sheet in front of you too, so you can follow along with that. So Dr. Clementi, the board has an opportunity to review your application materials, watch your video responses, conduct a personal interview with you a couple of weeks back, and also hear from our search consultants. Having said that, this is your first time in front of the larger D11 community. And with that, the first question, please share with the community your background, both professional and personal, and why you want to be the next superintendent of schools in District 11. Please specifically consider highlighting things that may not be readily evident in your application file.
Okay. I do want to start by saying how grateful I am for being here tonight. I met you all for the first time on May 7th, and I know you had some candidates to review, and the fact that you chose me along with 2 others, I just cannot tell you how grateful I am to be here. I also want to say thanks for the folks behind the scenes that set up this auditorium for us and made this possible. And Brandon Comfort, who was my guide by my side yesterday, he was amazing, and I feel so blessed to have been able to spend the entire day with him. We both found out we were Pueblo camaraderies, so we talked about our favorite restaurants in Pueblo. A very good man. So thanks everyone also who came out tonight to be here. Just really appreciate you being here for the support of hopefully your next superintendent. It's a no-brainer why I'm here. I was a teacher in this district for 14 years, and then I was an instructional coach for 3. I cut my teeth in this district. My love and loyalty for this community runs extremely deep. When I left in 2004, it was really to fly the nest and really learn everything and anything I could about education at a much deeper level. Like you said, you'd already gone into, some of the roles that I've served in, but as a teacher, I was so hungry about learning the research and understanding the depth of those instructional strategies and the research-proven practices that was going to give me the highest yield bang for my buck with my students. So I did a pretty decent job as a classroom teacher. So then going into administration, I wanted to see and really try and understand, how do you take that to scale in both a building level and a district level. So my purpose and my passion, this has been like my life's work. So when you think about, I know the question said, tell us a little bit about you professionally. I'll dig into my professional piece. I did do a lot. All of that work was intentional. So I served at the building level. I then served at the district level in a neighboring district here in the Pikes Peak region for 7.5 years. I went to Pueblo to serve my family. I thought how cool it would be to go back and serve in the district where I got my K-12 education. That was about paying it forward. I had the opportunity to do the turnaround work, and it was right at the time that division started was when the school improvement grants had just begun at the national level, and I was out of the first graduating class of the turnaround work. The reason I'm so passionate about turnaround work is because we know that not only in D11, but so many of our districts in this nation, the majority of our kids are not on grade level. The turnaround work is, how do we accelerate achievement and close achievement gap, specifically with our students of color and our students of poverty. So I've always really dug deep into the research on that. All means all, and that means our children from Tier 3 to our students who are working above grade level. What does it look like to really educate all students? I've got some graphs in your draft 90-day plan that I'd put together that I'll reference in a little bit here. But again, then I had an opportunity, again, I was a chief academic officer in both Pueblo City Schools and Aurora Public Schools. And then I had the opportunity to do national work, and I thought, well, I've been pigeonholed here in Colorado for 27 years. I really want to understand public education at a national level. So for 6.5 years, I globetrotted, and I worked with school districts from LA Unified to New York City schools. I was in districts from coast to coast. And that work really centered around working with school district leadership teams and school boards around their efforts to develop robust action plans around specifically those strategies, those systems, those conditions for teaching and learning that have proven time and time again turn around achievement and close achievement gaps. So that's what I've done professionally. So when this opened up, I've always watched D11 from the sidelines since I left in 2004. I'm very loyal to this district. I've done a ton of keynotes, and in my keynotes, I credit D11 for who I am as an educator today. So when it opened up, I've done nothing but research, and I have to tell you, my heart hurts for where achievement is in the district, and it hurts for the declining enrollment. When I left, it was above 30,000 students. So when I think about my skill set and what I bring to the table, and that coupled with my love and my passion for D11, it would be to round out my career in the career where I began and end here. I told a group yesterday I plan on living to 103, plan on working till about 100, so that gives you, if you want to do the math, 42 years with me, as long as you don't fire me before that. So that's my professional history. My personal history, I love my family and friends more than anything. I wasn't blessed with children of my own, but I do have four-legged children that think I gave birth to them. I'm a huge dog lover. My friends and I was married for 17 years, and actually he was an Air Force Academy grad himself, but things happen. His loss. But we have a great relationship, and I know I shared a story with a couple of groups. He knows my love and passion for D11, and I think I shared this with you when I met you on May 7th. And maybe I didn't, but I was a Crystal Apple Teacher Award winner. He knows my love and passion for the district. And he'd even gone with me to the banquet and stuff. But he called me maybe a year and a half ago, and he said, "Hey, do you know the superintendent in Harrison?" And I said, "I do. She's She's a good friend of mine, and he said, can you call her? I want to take my kids out of D11 and put them in her school district. And I said, wow. He knows my love and passion for D11. Why would you do that? He said, I'm just not happy. And to hear him say that, I know that there's work to be done here. I will champion this work like nobody's business. What I would vow to this community, to the students, to the teachers, to the principals, to the staff of this district, to the Board of Education, to anybody involved in this community, you will get probably the hardest worker you've ever met to make this happen and turn this around. So that broke my heart to hear that. So that's a little bit about me professionally and personally. In my spare, I used to be a competitive bodybuilder. I taught aerobics for 20 years. I used to even teach aerobics to the teachers at Carver Elementary. I was a classroom teacher at Carver Elementary. But so I still try and stay fit. Good old menopause has done its job on me. So I have a little bit more empathy for folks who go through that and struggle to stay in shape. So that's me personally and professionally why I want to come back home.
Thank you. Jason?
You had the opportunity to research District 11. What would you consider the strengths of the district, and what are the areas of improvement or systemic changes needed that present the best opportunities for success?
Strengths of the district, and I know I mentioned this when I met you on May 7th. The district is ripe and ready to go to the next level. One thing I know about D11, and probably one of the reasons why I loved working in D11 so much, was the commitment of educators in this district, the talent of the educators in this district, the hunger of the educators in this district. I still have friends who taught in this district and still teach in this district. They're so committed and passionate and are downright good teachers. So that's the strengths of the district. So then when I think about areas of improvement of systemic changes, here's what I've learned. And in your book, in the very front cover, you have this is a theory of action plan. So what we know with any district across this nation, here's what we know about districts. Both high-performing districts and low-performing districts pretty much have the same goals. Where they differ is their execution of systems and conditions for teaching and learning. So when you look at this theory of action model, it practically works for anything we do in our lives when we really zero it down to things. The center of the theory of action says beliefs. We've got to have a belief system where we believe all students can learn, regardless of zip code, regardless of color. In the second piece, it talks about the conditions for teaching and learning. So if there's one thing I want to highlight in your booklets, it's going to be on page, if you would turn to page 7. The two areas that I have highlighted that will be the biggest focus for me, that I think are the two biggest concerns in the district, are achievement and increase enrollment. And of course, you're going to go ask how. So on page 7, it truly breaks it down into those specifics. But when you look closely on page 7, it's funny, I was telling a group yesterday, I said, this work is not rocket science. If you take the effective schools research, if you take any of those programs that are out there, the turnaround work. We know that Mitchell turned in a plan that knocked the socks off the people on the state board in Colorado because their plan was so tight around turning around achievement in Mitchell. When you drill down that plan, you will find everything within this page 7. It's the systems that if we execute that across every building in our district, we will blow the roof off of achievement in this district. So where I was going with that was the difference between those school districts that are knocking it out of the park with achievement and those that aren't, that actually have the same goals, is a commitment to the execution of the systems and structures. So it starts with the belief systems, though. If we don't truly believe that every child can learn, and we're going to, come up with reasons why they can't, we know that there are factors outside of our control, like the home environments. We have these kids more waking hours than their parents do. And I've said to educators, we have them more waking hours during the school year than their parents do. We absolutely can make a difference. And quite frankly, our schools are the biggest hope for some of our students. I used to follow my former superintendent. He's a rock star, love him to death. But he used to stand up on stage and he'd say, "So hope is not a strategy." And then I'd get up after him and I'd say, "Hope fuels motivation, motivation drives effort, and effort determines outcomes." Our students need hope. So the belief systems, we have to have educators who truly believe in our students. That's going to give our kids hope. That's the center of the theory of action. But when you go into the systems, actually, systems and conditions for teaching and learning. The conditions for teaching and learning, again, it breaks it down. And where I was going yesterday, I said, it's all on one page. If we do this in this district, we'll blow it out of the park. And somebody in a group yesterday said, "Can we get that plan even if we don't hire you?" So I thought that was cute. And I felt like saying, sure you can, but it's going to take a leader that's going to execute that, so probably won't work.
Lauren.
How do you envision leading District 11 to improve student outcomes, specifically increasing student achievement and graduation rates for all demographics of students? And what is a typical time frame to observe noticeable district-wide improvements in student outcomes?
Yeah. So it's important to note, and I know that on my resume, it does say, that was again intentional on my part, I list all of the achievement gains that have happened in every role where I've served, where I've really had a direct contact on it. When I was a director, when I was at the turnaround unit, I worked with so many schools and districts, you can't really put your hand on the kind of achievement that happened. But I want to say, and I want to be very clear on this, any of those achievement gains that happened was not because of me. I led the direction, and I inspired the influence. That work was done by teachers and staff, but it takes a leader to be able to inspire and provide that direction. So when I think about leading and improving student outcomes, specifically student achievement, again, I mean, I can go into those specifics. We have to start with having talented staff as well as administrators. And when we recognize that there are some supports in terms of getting the talent that it's going to take to be in these classrooms, we need to plug those supports in. I shared an example where I took over the lowest, on May 7th, when I met you, the lowest performing district in the state of Colorado. I was asked by the Commissioner of Education to try and turn it around in 3 months, so I'm going to add a timeline to this. I'm like, holy smokes, what are we talking here? And he said, K-12 district, 125 kids. And I said, how are they not getting achievement, 125 kids? When I went in January 3rd, I recognized the teaching was nowhere where it needed to be. And in defense of those teachers, because you won't find a bigger teacher advocate than me, I recognize those teachers did not have the supports they needed, be it professional learning, relevant professional learning to their needs, as well as the resources aligned to both the state standards and the research-proven interventions necessary to close those achievement gaps. We hustled so hard and worked so hard. I hired some of the most distinguished and master teachers across the state of Colorado to coach them, as well as aligning the professional learning to the needs of those teachers. We went from lowest level of probation to fully accredited in 3 months. So, and I know I also shared with you that when I went to DC to do the turnaround work, I remember he was the Secretary of Education at the time. We were all in a meeting with him, and he said, bottom line is we have got to debunk the theory that change takes time, and I could not agree more. And the reason I'm just heck bent on that is because I've seen time and time again, when we execute what we know works in schools, you see immediate results. So I'm very, very, when I hear this is a 3 to 5 year plan, we don't have 3 to 5 years. When we look at the kind of growth that has to happen to a child that is not on grade level, our state gives us releases the data, the CMAS, and I know folks are not a fan of the CMAS, but in the end of the day, I'm going to date myself. I was a teacher pre-standardized testing, and I sat with parents at conferences, and those parents would say to me, I don't get it. Last year they had straight A's, and now they're getting C's. There was varying degrees of expectations. It equaled the playing field. No longer could you just say this kid is proficient. You had to demonstrate it. So when we think about the proficiency levels in any given classroom, and if you look in your chart, I do want to bring you to page 6. And this is the last time I'll make you look at my my draft 90-day plan. On page 6, you can see the graphs. That's 2019 CMAS. That's pre-pandemic. So we know in 2021, we did every other grade level that we assessed in ELA. So when you look at third grade, which is the 5 graphs over to the far left, the state releases that data in categories, proficiency categories. We know the not yet met is students who are 3 or more years behind, around. We know the partially proficient is anywhere from 1 to 3 years behind. We know that the approaching is anywhere from 0 to 1 years behind. We know the met is, those are the students who are on grade level. And then the exceeded, those are the students who are working above grade level. So if all means all, and I'm President Mel Packham, and I start at your school at Rudy, and I come up to you and say, listen, I'm going to bring my 8th grade daughter to, Jenkins? My daughter's starting in your school this year. She's been GT her whole life. Talk to me about how you're going to meet her needs. So when we think about all meets all, what does that work look like? In any given classroom, we've got the breakdown of that. So what we're looking at there is 34% of our third graders are on grade level or above in the district, which means 66% are those that are not on grade level. So that's the heavy lifting that has to happen, but what specifically does that work look like? And when that's the systems piece, when we were on that, your last board meeting, I cannot tell you how thrilled I am that you just approved Renaissance Star. I was, as a director of national academics and analytics, every district we worked with, we started with the district and said, you need to give us your internal data assessment before we can start our work with you. The 2 top data assessments in this nation are STAR and NWEA in terms of the gold standard. That Renaissance Star is going to give us the real-time realities of our students in this district so we can actually target and meet the specific instructional needs of every darn student in our class, K-12. Bless you for approving that assessment. I got to tell you, I was rooting when I saw that. Because I saw the look on your faces, and I heard some of the questions from Director Nelson. You know, how do we know that this is a gold star? And I was like, I can't wait to see him next week. I'm going to tell them they went with the best of the best. That is a game changer in moving achievement in school districts. It's like going to the doctor, and if the doctor doesn't run blood tests on you, and he's just putting you on medication left and right, you are not going to hit your target. So, and the beauty about that assessment, it's going to give you growth data. The other beauty about that assessment, it's a very highly correlated to how our students are going to perform on the CMAS. There should never be surprises going into that CMAS on how we're going to do. So rock on for that.
Director Daniels.
Thank you. I have a community question,
Sure.
Ms. Clementi. Increasing student enrollment in District 11 is paramount for our success. What will be your specific plan to accomplish this priority?
And again, I have a how page in your 90-day plan. I'm not going to make you go to that. I said that was going to be the last time I referenced your 90-day plan. Actually, no, stay on that graph page. Because I got to tell you, ever since I knew this position opened up, I've just been digging deep. I've always been watching D11 from the sidelines, and I've questioned, well, gosh darn it, why are they losing so many students? And I would hear this, well, you know D11's landlocked, right? And most of the people that live in D11 don't have students enrolled in the district. Then I recently find out, no, 10,000 plus students live in D11 boundaries and choice out. So if you look at same page 8, I've put 2 graphs there. And it breaks it out into, is it page 6, I'm sorry, page 6. So one of the things I wanted to uncover is where are our kids going? And so you can see the left graph, really 2,600, almost 2,700 students are choicing into academy. We've got 2,400 going to the charter. District 49, almost 1,700 kids. So the graph on the left tells us where our students who are enrolled in D11, where they're attending schools, there's your 10,000 plus kiddos. And then the chart on the right shows you kiddos who are choicing into our district. These efforts have got to be strategic. And so when you say, what are you going to do? Everybody's got to have skin in this game. I can definitely direct the efforts. This is not just the board's responsibility, my responsibility, and the new marketing coordinator's responsibility. And just to put it simply, you've got an aggressive goal of 400 students by October count. Well, truly, that needs to happen by August 1st, because that's when one of our first districts in the region starts. Parents are not going to enroll their kids in a district and then unenroll them by October count for us. So the reality is October 1st. Let's just be simple about this. If I did the math, 56 schools, 400 divided by 56 schools, every school has to put skin in the game. Everybody's got to bring in 7 kids. Of course, we want to do it fairly and do it on a percentage basis. The high school would bring in more. But we have to really understand and uncover, why are our kids leaving? Is it programming options? You know, I'm on the D11 website practically every day, and I love how they're advertising. We have the most CTE programs of any school in the Pikes Peak region. We have the #1 GT program. We've got to keep that stuff out there. But what do our marketing efforts look like? What, from us all the way to every single teacher? I used the example when I was a teacher here, and we were trying to pass a mill levy and a bond. And it really, really hurt my heart, because we know the power of our teachers, their voices with their parents and the influence that they have, but it hurt my heart when I knew a lot of folks that lived in the D11 boundaries did not get out and vote. And if we knew that all of our educators within the district had gone out and voted, it would have made a change. So it's really about getting everybody to get on board with this work and make this happen back for D11. Understanding the whys, and then how we can beef up some of our choice options. I do think that, I'm just going to call it for what it is. I don't know a parent out there that doesn't want to put their kid in the best school system in the region. And so the reputation of D11 right now is not that it's the best school system in the region. So we need to get that reputation back, and we'll get that back by getting our achievement back.
Director Loma.
What do you accept as evidence that teachers are effectively teaching and students are effectively learning?
So I'm a big believer of being in classrooms and providing feedback to teachers. I think that's where magic happens. I mean, if you're an administrator in a building or a coach, and we've got to get way beyond this is a gotcha system. This is about a collaboration. We're a teacher just like you are. This is about, I learned how to be a great teacher by the support I had from great teachers within the district. So as administrators, being in those classrooms is about understanding, is there a need there, and getting the supports for those teachers so they can bring their A game to work. So the only way you can get a pulse on how teacher performance or effective teaching is outline what those expectations look like. I remember going into one of my large school districts, and the deal was, every classroom's going to be rigor. We better see rigor in every classroom. And I was like, can we define, you know what, rigor is the word of the day right now in education. Back then, it still is. But what does that look like? A teacher will want to know, tell me what rigor looks like. Higher level questioning, engaged students, collaboration within the students. What does rigor look like? So we have to be very clear and define what that looks like. I'm a fan of, I know that the district has brought in Kagan strategies. That's a great program for engagement strategies. But what are those highest yield teaching strategies? I mean, they're out there. We know what they are. That's what we should expect to see when we're in classrooms. I think as a district, when we see some of our districts really knocking it out of the park, they're very clear on what those instructional norms look like from every single classroom across this district. I was in one of the classrooms at Palmer, and man, he was such a hot shot. I didn't want to leave. And I watched those kids eat out of his hands. That's good teaching. How do you assess whether students are effectively learning? The only way to do that is through data. I don't know when and how and why data turned into a four-letter word at some point, but that is the only real-time information we have to drive our next steps instructionally. So if I recognize that a student is struggling with phoneme discrimination or rhyming discrimination, what have you, that's my next steps instructionally that I need to nail within my kindergarten classroom. So the data.
Thank you. Community question. How do you define equity, and how will you address equitable practices as a superintendent in D11? Please give specific examples.
So equity, equity is about meeting every child where every child is. You know, I know there's a lot of conversations around equity in our schools, and basically it's meeting our students where they are. So and you know, I'm not going to go into the diversity work because then we're going to talk about culturally responsive teaching, but equity it's those bar graphs that I just showed you. We're so good at teaching to the proficient kids. All of our curriculum is aligned to, so I'm a fourth grade teacher, great. I've got the fourth grade curriculum that I'm teaching my students. That's great for that 32% of students who are proficient on grade level. How are these 67% of babies going to access that grade level content? So equity means meeting them where they are instructionally to bring them up. As a superintendent, it's about making sure that we have those equitable practices within every classroom in our school district. I'm just telling you, the outcomes, which is the last circle, is a lagging measure of how effectively we are executing the systems within our schools. You know, I've been in every type of scenario. My choice and my passion has always been to be in some of the most at-risk environments because that is the heaviest lifting. I recognize and I get that. We know in some of our schools, our lower performing schools, if we can attack that and get those kids on grade level by kindergarten, that gap is started before they even enter school in kindergarten. So when we recognize very clearly what those needs are of those kindergarten students, the sooner we close it, we're not going to have that bleeding once they get beyond third grade. I shared the story, again, when I met with you on May 7th, of the collateral damage that happens when we don't close that achievement gap by third grade. The correlation of crime and violence when we don't close that achievement gap by third grade. 85% of our adolescents interface with the court system because they are illiterate. So literacy is a huge piece for me. It's been my life's passion and my life's work to really get our arms around that. When we teach our children to read, they then can read to learn cross-content. If they can't read, we can get them into 8th grade, they can't read the content, they're done. So equity is about meeting the students where they are.
So thank you. We are about a third of the way into our allotted time that we have.
Okay.
Can you provide us with some examples of how you have effectively turned around facets of a large organization and were these efforts sustainable?
So I will use the district that was about 43,000 students. And what we did was we got very clear immediately on what those systems were that needed to be in place. We were very clear and very bold on our goals. We started with our goals. We got extremely clear on our why and our belief systems. And I'll share the example that when I had gone into the district, I looked at the superintendent and it was a low-performing district, very high-needs district, and I said, I think our goals are really low in the district. I mean, we'll never get to proficient with these kind of goals. And he said, well, what do you think they should be? And I said, minimum of a 10% increase to proficiency every grade level, every content area. And the research and accountability assistant superintendent looked at me and said, that's not even statistically possible. And I said, what's 10% of a classroom of 30 kids? It's 3 kids. If we can't meet 3 kids, and I'm not saying we just focus on 3 kids, the work is doable. I think we need to establish, so in 1 year, a district of 43,000 students, 34% of our schools were in the performance category. You know what that is. That's where you want to be in the accreditation status through the state accreditation. 34% of our schools were in the performance category. We went to 54% of our schools in 1 year. That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of work. The second year, we went from 35% 35 or 34% of our school, 35, I think, percent of our schools in the turnaround category to either 15 or 10%. So dropping them out, moving them up that scale. Now, in terms of sustainability, we were continuing to grow, but unfortunately, and you know what, I'm going to call it for what it is. Because somebody asked me yesterday, and it might be the question in the room, why was she only in Aurora Public Schools for 2 years? That and losing my mom were the 2 times in my life that rocked my world. I was asked to resign. A new superintendent came in, and when you're a new superintendent, you bring in your own chief staff. So 3 members of the chief staff were asked to resign. Rocked my world. Looked at this person, said, how can you do this? This is the best achievement this district has ever seen in the history of the district. So I don't know. I will say this. Here's what I will say. When I left, it was the highest performance the district had ever seen. Right now, that particular district is at the lowest performance ever in the history of the district. I just know, so sustainability-wise, we stay the course. We use the data to continually monitor real-time academic progress of our kids, and we never take our eye off that target. So it comes down to, a dogged execution and a bold commitment to never take our eye off the work that has to be done. It's just truly the difference between the doers and the dreamers in the system.
Director Nelson.
Thank you. Can you discuss what is the proper balance between parents' rights or beliefs and the expectations or requirements of the school district when they are not aligned?
Yeah, that's such a hot topic today. Our partnerships with our parents and community is going to be huge in terms of our overall success as a school district. I recognize and I get that. I think one of the things that we have to do as a society, there are definitely 2 divides going on right now. And there's always been 2 divides, but it's just been heightened over some of the societal things that have happened in this nation within the last 2 years. I get that. We really have to try and understand and, what's the word I'm looking for? We really have to try and understand the other perspective, period, no ifs, ands, and buts. I think we have to reserve judgment. Regardless of what side you stand on, this side is not going to convince this side to think like me, and vice versa. So in the end of the day, it's going to be important to come together on our shared values. I shared yesterday, no one will really know where I stand on anything except these things. I stand hard and fast on human decency. I stand hard and fast on compassion, empathy, belonging, acceptance, and treating others with love and respect. I might not agree with you, but in the end of the day, you're a human being, I'm a human being, we both bleed red, and in the end of the day, we want the best for our kids. So I understand why our parents want a choice in their schools. I'll give an example of, the gender identity thing. If you're raised a particular way and you have Christian views, we have to, whoever doesn't share those same Christian views, and I just want if my child was, and I get so concerned if I say this politically correct, but born with female parts, but now identifies as a male, and I want my child to be able to use the boys' bathroom. Well, then you've got this group of parents that go, whoa, I'm not comfortable with that. There's beliefs and the way their Christian beliefs or what have you, we have to try and understand that. Is the issue I want them to be able to go to the bathroom in the bathroom that is identified as for boys? Or is the issue my child just needs to go to the bathroom? The point being, we have to work together. We're never going to feel a same sense of however either side feels. We have to come together on our shared values and beliefs and work together co-collectively to develop something that we can both walk away with. Not everybody's going to be happy, but it's something that we can work with. So when our parents have issues about something that we are teaching in our classrooms, we've got to listen, seek to understand, reserve judgment. Try and understand where our parents are coming. They're sending us their precious asset, their most precious babies. Teachers are working their tails off. I've never met a teacher that doesn't love their children more than anything. Same with our building level administrators. You know, I'm a professional. I've done this my whole life. This is what I've gone to college for. And now I've got parents telling me what I need to teach. Let's just come together and talk about it. So it's a rough patch out there, but in the end of the day, we're not going to get anywhere until we can start to work together and at least come together on our shared values. Because right now, no one's winning.
Thank you. Director Jorgensen.
How will you empower staff members to achieve our vision for success, and how will you hold them accountable?
I'm a big believer of empowering folks. So the vision, it's going to be critical to motivate folks to, when we think about folks being motivated to work towards our common vision, it's really them buying into what we believe in terms of the future for our students. And again, I'm in education. I know educators. Never met an educator that got into this business because they didn't care about kids. So I guarantee you every teacher in this system really wants the very best for their kids and wants to get achievement. So in terms of the holding them accountable, accountability comes from within. I looked at you on May 7th and I said, you can hold me accountable. If we don't get achievement, you can fire me. You don't need to hold me accountable. I hold myself accountable. In terms of staff, I don't ever want to look at a staff member and say, I'm holding you accountable for this. When we do that, we've lost them. What I need to do as a leader is I need to inspire them to be accountable on their own. They need to believe in the mission. They need to believe in our direction, and that's something that we co-create together, but they have to hold themselves accountable. I was a personal trainer forever, and many times, I'd give them I trained them with the weights, but they were on their own for the diet, and let's face it, 99% of the way you look is because of what you put in your mouth. So you can train all you want. If you're eating not swift, it's going to show up in the way you look. So in the end of the day, when I said bye-bye to them, at the end of the day after I trained them, they were accountable to themselves on what they put in their mouth. So accountability in terms of me holding them accountable, I'll want them to hold themselves accountable. It's going to come down to them. Will we all be looking at the data to make sure we're on target to hit our goals? You darn right we will. But at the same time, this is not going to be about a gotcha. We're all working together. I'm a huge fan of professional learning communities. When we see that someone's not on target and we're not moving the needle with certain students, we work together to put in next steps that are going to hopefully accelerate that movement for those students. So ultimately, my job as a leader, if I have to say I'm going to hold you accountable, that means I've failed at leadership. It's a crutch for when you've failed at leadership. I'm going to want our staff and everyone on board to be accountable. The word accountable basically means we're doing what we need to do to hit our goal. And so every single one of us is going to have to hold ourselves accountable for that.
Community question.
Yeah.
It's you, Director Daniels.
Like many school districts, District 11 is dealing with staffing shortages. What are some strategies or steps you will take to recruit and retain high-quality staff? Please cite specific strategies you have successfully used in your prior work.
So we really want D11 to be the place that folks want to come work. okay? And so that's going to be part of the reputation piece. That's going to be the word of mouth piece. Right now, it's a teacher's pick of the field where they get to go teach. And so we've really got I know that we need to stay competitive with our surrounding districts, like it or not. I mean, the research will say what ends up retaining those teachers. It's not going to be the salary, it's going to be the culture. So we've got to make sure that our culture is top-notch, and when I say culture, it's really taking care of our people. When I say taking care of our people, one of the biggest complaints that I hear, I don't feel appreciated, I don't feel appreciated for the work that I do, as well as supported in the work that I do. So when we think about that, that's something that we need to make as a major priority in what we do as a school district. So, I've heard lots of teachers go into districts saying, I went there just because I heard it's such a great place to work. There's not a lot of chaos going on in the system. Folks are they're on the same page in terms of the direction of the district. Compensation, again, so in terms of the recruitment of high-quality staff, I think we got to be one of the first ones out of the chutes, too, in terms of our HR practices. When we anticipate and know that there's going to be a filling, or a need for a teacher, we need to make sure that we get out there and market that position. And again, our teachers and staff are very powerful in terms of their voices and their recruitment, their word of mouth to others. Hey, you ought to come teach in my district. So let's get our culture right. Let's make sure that how we treat our staff is top, and really continue to market the great things about D11. Specific strategies that I've successfully used in prior work, I'm just going to call it what it is. My role was I led the divisions of curriculum and instruction. And so, we would, as a superintendent cabinet, we all co-collaborated together once a week, and those meetings were like 4.5 hours long. What was the beauty of that is to be able to see how every division runs. So being a part of those meetings gave me that helicopter view of running an entire school district. So we would give the HR superintendent recommendations of some of the next strategies, because we sometimes struggle to get folks in that district. In terms of talent, I'm going to go back to that district where I went in as an interim superintendent, very rural district, off the beaten path. No one was signing up to go there. I walked in, I knew I had to groom and grow what I had. So let's groom and grow what we have. I also think creative ways of attracting, again, it's a teacher's market, if you will, in terms of where they get to go teach, but I'm sure we have programs internally where we're really working with our counselors to recruit some of our high school students to go into it. But, really tapping into folks within the community who might want to change careers and be created in our efforts to provide scholarships for even adults who might want to change careers and go into that. What kind of scholarships are we offering for our paras? And our classified, gosh, learning what they're living on, that breaks my heart. I don't know how anyone can live on that. So really getting creative on getting some scholarship dollars to support some of these paraprofessionals or these classified to get their degree. I used to always tell paraprofessionals in the buildings, it's about time you get paid what you're worth. Go get that degree. And if we can support them in those efforts and give them the belief systems in themselves, you've got it what it takes. You'll make it through college. You'll get it through these 4 years. I think that would be beautiful.
Director Loma.
Name one or two strengths or skills you possess that make you the best candidate for District 11. What coaching supports, if any, do you think you'll need to be successful as a superintendent?
I'm going to say bar none, strengths would be my understanding around turning around achievement. It's truly been my life's work. It just has. I've been passionate about that work. It's what keeps me up at night when I think about the children that walk through our doors and the trust from our parents to get their babies or their children where they need to be, that's a lot of work on our part, but it is the most rewarding work. And that's what I've studied for over 3 decades, is that. That's my strongest skill set. What coaching supports? You know, I have lots of phone friends. I've made it a point to surround myself with some pretty educational hotshots who have really done this work. They're going to be on speed dial when I hit things that are, you know, my biggest vow and commitment to you as a school board and this school district and community is to not fail you. Will I screw up? Of course I will. Everyone does. But man, I will give this district everything I have in my power to not screw up. And so folks who have worked with me, folks that I know you've reference checked, will tell you her efficacy in her work and her commitment to the job, that's what I will give you. And so I'll try and anticipate a screw up and make sure that I get that phone a friend in before the screw up actually happens. But that's going to be a promise to you. So that's what I'll say to that, Reverend Loma.
Could you discuss with us your communication strategy with the people you serve, including internal and external stakeholders of the district? And how do you know when your communication is effective?
I think communication, my dissertation research was on leadership, educational leadership. But leadership, in that research, I had to dissect what is it that separates the good from the great leaders. And through exhausting the literature, it came out with 17 characteristics of the most effective leaders, regardless of profession, in this world. And I just knew number one was going to be relationships, because I've just always been, it's about the relationships. If we get the relationships right, everything else is going to fall in place. I think that came out, I don't know where it came out. Number one was communication. And so that told me, and when we think about anytime we get into trouble within an organization, it's because it's been a lack of communication or a miscommunication. So we have to have really tight systems in place around how we operate in our communication system. So I believe all communication needs to be clear, concise, and informative. There also has to be processes in place in terms of who needs to hear this and in what order. So, you know, I know the communication department here in D11 is pretty top-notch. I got some good insight on your communication assistant superintendent here in the district, and it's going to be key to the way we operate. But a big part of that is going to be, too, on your charge to me on what that looks like in terms of how we roll out our communication. So, again, I think the processes need to be very, very tight and not just, you know, at our level. It's something that we need to systemically make sure this is how we operate and how we communicate to our parents and community.
Thank you. The next question is a community question. How will you judge your own effectiveness as a superintendent? And in your opinion, how should the board measure your success at the end of 1 year and at the end of 5 years?
Again, just because one of the biggest, my two biggest priorities is achievement and increasing enrollment. So the only way I'm able, I'll judge my own effectiveness. I'm a big believer of Leadership 360, capturing the data from the community as well as our internal folks to understand how I'm doing as a superintendent, how I'm doing to serve their needs. So I'm a big believer of capturing that data. If I don't capture that data, I have no idea how I'm doing, and I certainly don't want to capture it through safe details or anonymous things. It's going to be important I stay ahead of the curve. I think it's also important that I'm very visible and accessible and relatable and personable and open to people. Anyone, I'm a very people person, so I don't like when there's discourse. That's just who I am, nature. I'm someone who really wants to get to the heart of, let's get to the bottom of this so we can move forward. But I'll measure my own effectiveness by we will be bird dogging that assessment data, that internal assessment data, to make sure that we're on track to hit those goals that we've established for the end of the year. By minimum of quarterly, but our students who are not on grade level, I'm going to recommend, I know on the board meeting, I heard that the thought is 3 times a year. Any student who is not on grade level needs that data, and that's the beauty of the Renaissance. We can look at that data as many times as we want and continue to re-administer that. And I think for any student who is not on grade level, at a minimum, our tier 3 kids, 2 weeks, but at a minimum, once a month, be looking at those students and tracking their progress, but continually having a pulse on what our achievement growth is looking like throughout the year. So again, where we are in terms of both growing, my understanding, I learned this yesterday, is that we're going to have a universal enrollment system now that's going to give us that data at the central office level. So really, the deal is you have got to have that continual pulse to understand whether or not you're being effective. And so by the end of the first year, depending on what those goals are that we establish, did we hit them? And I just, 5 years is a lot. I would say 1 and 2 years. 5 years, I'm going to shoot for the stars. I'm all about bold and audacious goals. When there's a will, there's definitely a way. So, we are going to decide, if I am given the opportunity to serve, we're all going to decide, you're going to decide what those metrics look like in terms of your expectations of me and what what those metrics look like and what goals you want me to hit quarterly. That's what we'll use to measure that.
All right, thank you. This is another community question. Nationally, there has been debate about personal values and social issues in K-12 classroom lessons and discussions. What are your thoughts on the responsibility of public education in this aspect? Please elaborate with some examples.
So, I know this debate that's going on, and it's caused so much controversy, and it's been, I do believe, somewhat of a distractor in us being able to get our work done. I'll go back to the story of, there's 2 different sides here, and in the end of the day, when we think about the debate on what can be taught, lessons taught, and discussions in the classroom, those are conversations that we have to come together as a district to what we can live with. I'm trying to see both sides. I'm not going to tell you where I stand on either side. It doesn't matter. What matters is this. Because somebody wants, because the minute if I were to share, here's where I sit, politically on that side, a judgment will start on me. What I try and do is seek to understand. So we're pretty clear about separation of church and state in our schools, okay? That's been something that we've known for a long time. But when we think about now some of the recent things that have come up, like critical race theory, we have to try and understand there are parents out there that truly believe. We can't judge. This is their belief system. We can't judge them because it's their belief system. Truly believe. No, what that does is it teaches my child now is suffering the consequences of what happened so many years ago. Right or wrong, we have to try and understand both sides. This is about being able to come together respectively versus I'm right, you're wrong, and co-collectively deciding what we can all live with as a school system. I'm not going to make that call as a superintendent. I don't think that's my call to make. It's the teachers and our parents and our community's call to make. And our school board. In the end of the day, we're wasting a lot of time, and again, no one's winning. And the collateral damage of that is our students. We need to get back to the heart of our work, which is getting our kids ready for the world outside of public education. Okay, let me at least beat the last guy. How many questions did he get through?
till the end of the page, I think 19.
He got to 19? Okay. I'll try and boogie on these last ones.
Director Daniels.
Thank you. As our superintendent, what steps would you take to gain a better understanding of the school district and the community, and how can we be a positive, sorry, let me start over. How about that? Trying to
Okay.
get through a hot flash, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I always say,
Apologize.
is it me or am I having my own private summer, or is it hot in here?
I'm with you. Oh, my goodness. Okay, as our superintendent, what steps would you take to gain a better understanding of the school district and community? And how can you be a positive ambassador for our school district?
Oh, the positive ambassador, that's like a no-brainer. I mean, I will be out there shooting from rooftops how great D11 is. I believe in this district. That's why I'm sitting here today. Like I said, I've been watching D11 from a distance since 2004, since I left. The positive ambassador piece is I will do nothing but scream the cheers for this school district and get the kids back and get our 10,000 kids back. I talked to a former superintendent. He says, just don't go dipping in other people's ponds. That's how he called it in terms of trying to get kids from other districts. But at least getting our 10,000 kiddos back. Gain a better understanding of the district. The only way you do that, visibility, being out in the trenches, informal and formal opportunities for, townhouses. Hello.
Town halls.
Town halls in townhouses. How'd I save myself on that one? Town halls, just tons of opportunities. I go back to the whole visibility piece. I can't wait to get in and start talking to people. I mean, I've always talked to people about, anytime I'm down here, my sister lives here, and we're out at a restaurant or whatever, I'll ask them questions about D11. What are your thoughts on D11? So just being out and in the community and making it happen, it will be a sacred part of my calendar that I will hold sacred. And, when I was a building level administrator, I used to look at the secretary when I was going to go in and do spot observations, and I would say, unless somebody's died, don't find me, because it was such a priority for me to be in those classrooms. Same thing, it will be sacred for me to be out and about in the community, to really get my arms around the community and internally in the buildings. The site visits and being in buildings, one of my biggest fears and nightmares when I went into central office was I didn't ever want anyone to say, what does she do anyway? They'll know.
This is a community question.
Okay?
Describe your beliefs about student discipline and how you balance addressing student behavior issues in the classroom with the maintenance of an effective instructional environment.
If we don't have our arms around student behaviors in a classroom, we're not going to get a whole lot done. So anytime that we struggle within a classroom that struggles with student discipline, it's very important that we get the teacher the supports that he or she needs for that. I know as a building level administrator, we used to dissect the office referrals. And one particular time, and then from that, we used that to do an actual professional learning at one of our staff meetings. But what we had learned was 97% of our office referrals were disobedience and defiance, which spoke to teacher-student relationships. Anytime a kid is disobedient, defiant, it means it speaks to teachers' relationships. The rest were, drugs, weapons, what have you. But, and you can see when you're a building level administrator, some of the high flyers, some of the teachers that are continually sending kids in. That helps you to understand, this is not a dinging that teacher, this is my sister struggles with classroom management. She loves the kids more than anything, but she needs some supports there. It's about getting those teachers the supports. 10 times out of 10 when I'd get a little pistol in my office and, the referral says, he said, bleep to me, I would pull up their schedule and I'd say, I see you have Miss Paddock. Would you have said that to her? No. Why? Because I love her. We know that when students love their teachers, I shared yesterday, I was that pistol. I got in a fist fight when I was in kindergarten and suspended in kindergarten. But boy, when I had Miss Young in 3rd grade, I didn't say peep in her class because I loved her so much, I did not want to screw up. So really, what does that work look like? I know you've got Capturing Kids' Hearts, huge fan of Flippin', that's his program, and that's what that's about, building those teacher-student relationships with kids.
Please give an example of a plan that you implemented that did not turn out as you anticipated. What did you learn from this experience? What would you have done differently to change the outcome?
That's a great question. So, and this was a huge leadership learn. I will never do this again. And any leader sitting in this room goes, whoa, what was she thinking? I even knew better. So we had one of the lowest reading third grade reading scores in the state of Colorado, in this big district that I was in. And we finally went up the first year I was there. And then we toggled and went back, just 1 percentage point, but still. But what I'd uncovered, and I knew, our teachers were not teachers of reading. Our universities do not prepare our teachers to be teachers of reading. So our districts are burdened with that cost to train our teachers the science of reading. Thank goodness the State Department now has the program that any early literacy teacher K through 2, K through 3 has to go through that training. But I made an here's where I'm going to really get the administrators in the room like, is she nuts? I made an executive decision. We're training all K through 5 teachers in letters, and anyone in this room who's an instructional leader knows what letters is. It's probably the number one. I was trained in letters. I'm a trainer for letters. Number one reading program out there, professional development program out there to teach teachers the science of reading. I made the executive decision. We're training all K-5 teachers in letters cross district. I'm not making excuses, but I laid in bed and I cried when those scores came out, and I said, something's got to happen, and quickly. We got the scores, I think, in March, and I knew for that to roll out come August, so much had to happen between March and August, from the professional development to the materials to the trainings, everything. And so that's why I made it so quick. So what happened, Director Loma, was the pushback. And that pushback came because, shame on me, I brought no one to the table and made an executive decision. How would I do that differently? I'd probably bring them to the table the very next day and still try and roll it out because I do have a sense of urgency, because, sometimes we know work has to be done, and then we give ourselves a year to make that happen. And where we're at, we sometimes don't have that kind of time. But the deal is, I needed to bring folks to the table. You never make a decision of what's going to impact the teachers, something the teachers are going to be expected to roll out, without having them first and foremost at that table. So that's where I screwed up big. I'll never do that again.
This is another community question. We hear that many high-achieving students are not staying in D11 schools and are finding academic support and relevant education in other schools. How will you attract and retain these students and provide them with rigorous and tailored education to meet their needs?
We have to understand, first and foremost, what does that work look like to meet the needs of students working above grade level? If we have the #1 GT program in the district, she's obviously got a pulse on what that work looks like. I know anytime I had directors who were responsible, like if I had the director of science, I would say to that science director, go out there and find out who's getting this work done. Look for like demographic districts, see who's knocking it out of the park, what are they utilizing, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to find out what is it we're competing against, but we also have to be pretty proactive about being the first ones out of the chutes to offer something really cool. I've done a lot of work and research with McCrindle, which is out of Australia, and they're doing the work right now to understand our next generation of students, who are the Gen Alphas. The Gen Alphas are any 10-year-old and younger in our school systems right now. They will graduate in 2030. Their work around what we should be teaching in our schools right now is paramount, and it's so forward-thinking. So, being in front of what does that work look like? Just as much as it hurts me to see some of our students who are 3 or more years, any student who's not on grade level, it hurts me to see if we're not really providing the kind of supports for our students who are working above grade level. The beauty that I uncovered in District 11, and it's the GT person would probably chime in and agree with this, but I uncovered D11's growth rate for the gifted students, or the students working above grade level, is at 58 median growth percentile. Typically, our students who are working at grade level don't typically show a year's growth in a year's time because we're so used to teaching grade level. So what are we doing to provide those enrichment activities for our students working above grade level? One of the creative things we did in a previous district was we would bus our 6th graders to the high school to take some of the high school algebra classes. So we got real creative in that. So yeah, we need to get really creative about how we are providing the opportunities for those students who, again, aren't being challenged.
Leaders often have to make unpopular decisions, sometimes at the spur of the moment. What are factors that will help guide your decision-making process, and how will you communicate that to the stakeholders?
So again, that's going to come back to the communication processes that we have in place. We were all building that plane in the air. The nice thing, when I worked for, again, it's the largest learning company in the nation, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. One of the things that we did as executive directors, again, our work, the 6 of us, was to just work with school district leadership teams. We immediately, the minute that hit on Friday, Monday, we had over 100 superintendents across this country on a video platform talking about, holy smokes, what are we going to do? So in terms of, we can't make our decisions and the work that we do in isolation. We have got to capitalize on each other and what we bring to the table on how to address this. So unpopular decisions, sometimes at the spur of the moment. Something just came down from the healthcare providers within the community that, no, the numbers are up, our recommendation is that you shut schools. Sometimes we get those messages last minute, but we have to be out front with our community to ask for that forgiveness. I mean, there's only so much we can do when we ourselves aren't given the time to make some of those decisions. If we do have the time to make those decisions and we're not using it as effectively as we could, we probably need to rethink our processes. So again, I think we need to it's really good to try and, we saw how adaptable and how resilient we are with what COVID was a country disruptor, for sure. And the impact that it had on us as educators, it's really, really unfortunate, the impact it had on teachers, students, parents, communities. But try and be as proactive as we can and in front of these things, and then have those clear processes in place on how we plan on dealing with it communication-wise. And make sure those processes are clear and communicated via our website, via auto robocalls, what have you, to really keep our parents informed of how we're going through these decisions. I got 16 minutes left. I'm going to beat the last candidate.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, I get one more. What strategies do you find most successful in resolving disagreements, disputes, or conflicts? And in the age of social media, how will you handle the backlash and criticism you will likely receive for unpopular decisions?
It's tough. Nobody likes criticism. Nobody likes the backlash of that. When you get in leadership roles, it's just inevitable. It's going to happen. You can't make everybody happy. In terms of how I what I find to be most successful is really looking people in the eyes and really seeking to understand. I've had to do a lot of mediations between principals and parents, between, a lot of mediations between principals and parents. And when it gets to that heightened state of emotion, there's a fear going on with folks. And it's really important to understand what folks are going through and why they bring such a strong feeling and a belief to the table. But ultimately, Director Loma, what I find to be the most successful is listening way more than I talk and really getting them to try and understand other perspectives, really trying to come together on some of the things that we do value together. It's really sitting down and being human beings together and agreeing to disagree, but keep really working to keeping it calm and respectful towards each other.
Yeah.
Okay. What has been your experience with facilities evaluations and capital planning? And can you please share your thoughts about budgeting for facility improvements with limited financial resources?
So I had mentioned earlier that one of the beauties about serving on a superintendent cabinet in several districts, I served on it in 3 different districts, was being a part of those conversations and doing that work together. And so understanding how that particular division really ranked and ordered how we decided our priorities within the districts. And obviously, the first priority is going to be about student safety. I mean, I saw what's happening at Sabin in that bottom level. The settling, I mean, and we're told that it's safe, but man, as a parent going in, I might go, wow, that wall looks like it might fall over. Really be, so I've been a part of those processes and those conversations. I've not actually been out in the field doing the work. That was the role of the COO within the district. But, that work and how we spent and developed our budgets around that came down to prioritizing, rank and ordering the priority of needs, from worst needs to least amount of needs. And of course, student safety drove that.
Thank you. What does an innovative culture in a school district look like to you? And can you describe some specific examples?
That's interesting. Innovative culture in a school district. I think that's a culture where we really embrace ideas outside and above what we're currently doing. I think, and that's what the word innovation is about. What are we doing that's outside the norm? So when we think about our culture, I'm a big believer of celebrating folks, making sure our people recognize how much they mean to us, how much we need them. So I've always, I don't know that that's innovative, but we've made it a point across all employee groups to have quarterly awards ceremonies that we really put our money where our mouth is. I know that me as a leader, I made it a point to handwrite, cards and letters and personally distribute them to teachers and leaders throughout the district that I'd heard of. I think that carries a lot of weight. But I think innovative culture, it's just our work together to understand how can we, when I lived and worked here, this was my family. I want to come back to my family. This, again, to circle around and end my career where I started it. I love this community. And I have always loved the culture within the schools, and it has hurt me to understand where the district is right now. I've seen thousands of districts across this nation in the work that I've done. And maybe it's because I spent so many years here. I don't know that I've ever met somebody, a group of folks, who are as hungry about this work and loving towards kids than the teachers and the staff that I've worked in this district. Now, a lot of them, I'm dating myself because very few of them are left, but that doesn't turn over with staff because of age. That culture is already here. So, I don't have all the answers. I would want to know, what can we do to better our culture? What can we do to be innovative in our culture? I'm very collaborative in my leadership. I don't have all the answers, and I will definitely go with what consensus is in the group. I just believe everybody's got such great ideas to bring to the table. It's really important that we listen. So that's that.
All right.
And I got 2 questions in 10 minutes.
Discuss with us your experience building community support, funding a mill levy override and/or bond initiative.
We were successful in a district, in a big district. And the thing is, you need to get out in front of that, number one. Number one, you need to establish the need. You need to establish the need, you need to establish the why, you need to establish the dollar amount for that need, and you need to be extremely transparent with the community on those things. Once you've established the need, you need to develop a plan. You develop the plan in terms of, A, how we're going to market it. B, we immediately come up with a MLO and a bond task force, and we just start hitting the ground running, campaign. We work our tails off to get the yes voters to the polls and get the on-the-fence voters to the polls as well. But we need to be really dogged in those efforts. I know this last bond, the beauty of this last bond, and if the district's going to go for another bond, the biggest squawk that folks have, especially in these tumultuous times with you know, where we are with inflation right now, nobody's going to want tax increases. We need to be clear, this is not going to impact you financially. But it lost by 11 votes. That's a no-brainer when we think about the work that we can get done in our schools. So be very clear about that. And, you know, just like I said when I was at Saban, I said, see, if we think about going for a bond, we need to be really visible in some of the work that needs to be done with videos showing folks and providing actual tours within our buildings. You want to know why? Here's why. I'll tell you, I remember it was called America's Crisis in Schools, and Oprah hosted it. And I watched this, and what it was Oprah had taken a group of students from a school system in Detroit public schools. Those buildings were dilapidated. It was terrible. She bused them to some of the most beautiful school facilities in the city. I was on, because I taped it, because a lot of folks will go, it must be nice that you're home in time to watch Oprah. So I was on my elliptical watching it. I was bawling, watching those kids go into that system going, how come we can't have that? Broke my heart to see that. And then taking the kids from these beautiful state-of-the-art facilities and busing them to inner Detroit, to these dilapidated buildings, and the shock and horror on their faces. So I think if we're real clear about some of the upgrades and the things that we need to get done with our community, that's something else I know and love about D11 community. I believe they'll step up to the plate. They love this community. And hey, I mean, what a great announcement just recently. Second best place to live in the nation. Let's capitalize on that. I mean, but let's show folks, listen, we're hurting. Our school facilities are hurting. Compared to what's out there and some of the facilities that are out there, our kids deserve better. And I have no doubt parents will step up to the plate on that one.
Thank you.
Okay, you made it to the final question.
Good.
So, is there anything else, so closing remarks, is there anything else you feel we should know about your candidacy for this position that we haven't learned from your application materials or our time together today?
I think I hope I've done a pretty good job about my intentions and my reasonings of why I want to come home. So, again, I've given you how long I plan on living. I'll work till 100. This is my last stop. This to come back and serve in D11 would be beyond fate. and to round out my career where I started. It'd be pretty cool. I swore I wasn't going to cry, but I made it to the last question.
Thank you, Dr. Clementi.
And again, I want to tell you how grateful I am, just to even make it to this piece. It means everything. Jason, I watched all 8 graduation ceremonies, just so you know. I said to Director Daniels, boy, her fire and her energy. Director Loma, you talked about we need to embrace the pain of change. Change is inevitable. I want to talk to you I do want to say one more thing. Change is inevitable, and reform in education, that word sounds scary to a lot of folks. Ultimately, all reform means systemic changes in how we function as a school system. And those systemic changes is really embedding what we know works in schools and being dogged about our execution. So reform is a scary word, accountability is a scary word. Accountability just means we're doing what we need to do in order to hit our outcomes. But for folks that don't know in the room, Jason was one of my second graders, and thank goodness I was a good teacher to him. I think I was. I don't know, maybe I wasn't, but it killed me when I met you on May 7th, and you said, don't you remember me? And I was like, oh, I don't. And then I didn't ask you. I said, what did I have you as? And you said a second grader, because I taught 2nd through 5th. So at your graduation ceremony, you said, class of 2004, and right? 2003. So then I did the math, and I was like, oh, I had him in. So I needed to figure out, when did I have you? So I had you prior to being married. I was still Miss Clementi. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, too. I said my top 2 reasons for being here, or coming back home. The work, the board priorities is aligned to my strengths, but I will reiterate this. I've worked with hundreds of boards across this nation in the work that I've done nationally. I can so get behind this board, and I checked out with folks in the groups that I interviewed with yesterday. Talked to me about this board. I've watched every single board meeting. Your commitment to achievement and your sense of urgency, that's not always the case. And so when I think about serving a board and working for a board, this is a board that I could 100% get behind, and just we can rock it. And I appreciate your selfless hours and dedication to serving the D11 board, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours you all are putting in for your commitment for the kids in this district, and I just appreciate that.
Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Clementi. We are right on time. You got through all the questions, so you set the bar for the next candidate.
That's right.
They can,
My understanding is they're yappers, and I thought I was a yapper, so we'll see.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you again taking the time to come and meet with us. And thank you for visiting our schools and engaging with our stakeholders.
Thank you for this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll take a break again now, and the last candidate will meet with us at 8 p.m. starting.